You think you'd recognize one if you saw them. A serial killer, a predator, a monster. You think there would be something, a look in their eyes, a chill in the air, a wrongness you could feel, but you wouldn't. Because the first terrifying truth about serial killers is this: they blend. They look like neighbors, coworkers, friends, sometimes even like heroes. Ted Bundy volunteered at a suicide hotline. John Wayne Gacy performed at children's hospitals as a clown. Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, was a church president and compliance officer. Let's talk about why. The mind of a serial killer is not like yours. It mimics normalcy, masks itself, learns the rituals of humanity not because it feels them, but because it needs to. Let's talk about the making of a predator. There's a debate that spans psychology, criminology, neuroscience, nature versus nurture. Are serial killers born defective, or are they shaped by violence, neglect, trauma? The answer is complex, because it's both. Most serial killers share a dark triad of early experiences: severe abuse or neglect, emotional, physical, sexual, early signs of cruelty towards animals, siblings, weaker children, a fractured sense of self, no stable identity, no secure attachment. But not everyone abused becomes a killer. Not everyone cruel escalates to murder. There's something more. Let's talk about neurological differences. Brain scans of serial killers often reveal abnormalities. Underactive prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for impulse control, empathy, moral reasoning. Overactive amygdala, the center of fear, aggression, and primal emotion. In short, their brakes are broken. Their rage is amplified. But here's the chilling part. They know how to imitate, how to smile, how to nod in the right places. Because from a young age, they learn that showing their true feelings is dangerous. So they build masks, masks of charm, politeness, normalcy, and underneath, a roiling, empty hunger. Let's talk about early warning signs. Psychologists point to the McDonald triad: animal cruelty, fire setting, bedwetting beyond a certain age. But these are crude markers. Many killers show none of them. A better indicator is fantasy life. From childhood, many serial killers create violent inner worlds. Worlds where they have total control, where they are feared, worshipped, untouchable. Over time, the fantasy isn't enough. It needs to break into reality. And when it does, the first kill is never the last. Let's pause. The scariest thing isn't that serial killers exist. It's that for most of their lives, they seem just like you. And by the time the mask slips, it's already too late. It doesn't happen overnight. No one wakes up a killer. The mind builds it slowly, layer by layer, thought by thought, until the fantasy becomes too heavy to contain. Let's talk about the fantasy cycle. For a serial killer, the fantasy starts small. An intrusive thought, a forbidden image, a fleeting idea of power, of domination, of violence. At first, it's enough to imagine. They replay scenes in their mind, control every detail, feel the surge of pleasure, of absolute mastery. But fantasies have a fatal flaw. They escalate. What satisfied yesterday bores today. The mind demands more vividness, more control, more blood. The killer scripts elaborate scenarios, what the victim says, how they beg, how the killer responds. They imagine every second, perfect it like a director rehearsing a play. But imagination, no matter how vivid, loses its edge. The body aches to match the mind, and eventually, the fantasy steps into reality. Let's talk about crossing the line. The first kill is never random. Not really. It might seem opportunistic. A hitchhiker, a neighbor, a stranger at the bar. But inside the killer's mind, that moment has been rehearsed 1,000 times. Every scream, every strike, Every last breath practiced in silent obsession. And when the real moment comes, there is no hesitation. There is relief. Finally, the unbearable pressure dissolves. Finally, they are doing what they were meant to do. Let's talk about the transformation of reality. After the first kill, the brain changes. Neurochemicals flood the system, adrenaline, dopamine, endorphins. The killer feels euphoric, invincible, untouchable. The barriers that once might have stopped them, fear, guilt, doubt, crumble. Killing becomes not just something they can do, it becomes something they must do because nothing else brings that rush, that silence, that perfect moment when the world obeys their will. Let's talk about ritual. Serial killers rarely kill randomly. They develop rituals, patterns of behavior that give structure to the chaos, stalking victims for days, choosing clothing, weapons, locations with precision, repeating acts, binding hands a certain way, whispering specific words, taking trophies. Ritual isn't just habit, it's religion. Each detail anchors the killer's fractured mind. Each repeated act reaffirms their dominance. And without it, and they feel lost, empty, because the ritual isn't about the victim. It's about the killer's own survival. Their internal world is collapsing, and the only thing that holds it together is the reenactment of the fantasy. Let's talk about control and the illusion of omnipotence. For the serial killer, control is everything. Control over the victim's fear, control over life and death, control over the narrative that, finally, someone is powerless before them. And this need for control often comes from early wounds, childhoods where they were helpless, abused, violated, ignored. Killing reverses the humiliation, where once they were victims, now they are gods. In those moments, they rewrite their own history, and they become addicted to the feeling. Let's talk about the descent into compulsion. Most serial killers do not stop on their own. The fantasy continues to escalate. The need for more elaborate, risky, brutal acts grows. Some try to delay it, replace it with pornography, stalking, petty crimes. But eventually, the hunger overwhelms the barriers. And when they kill again, it's faster. Less planning, more savagery. The mask slips. The monster shows itself. Not because it wants to be caught, but because it no longer cares. The fantasy consumes the reality. And in the end, even the kill doesn't satisfy. It merely postpones the unbearable emptiness for a little longer. Let's talk about the internal world of the killer between murders. They aren't dormant. They aren't normal. Between kills, many experience intense psychological deterioration, insomnia, paranoia, intrusive, violent thoughts, fantasies so vivid they invade waking consciousness. They feel hunted, even when no one is chasing them, because they are being hunted by their own mind. Let's talk about why they often seem normal. Serial killers develop a facade to survive. They can hold jobs, raise families, attend church, make jokes at barbecues. Because they compartmentalize, they build mental walls so high, even they can sometimes forget what lurks behind them. But the pressure builds, the cracks form, and when the next victim appears, sometimes with a glance, sometimes with a word, the mask falls away, and the monster steps forward. Let's pause. We like to believe that evil is dramatic, loud, obvious, but the truth is quieter, more patient, more ordinary. A man handing out candy at Halloween, a woman working at a daycare, a smiling neighbor at the grocery store, all hiding inner worlds, so violent, so relentless, that if you could hear them, you would never sleep again. For a long time, they are invisible, ghosts in plain sight, slipping through police dragnets, leaving baffling crime scenes, living double lives so perfectly that no one even thinks to suspect them. But eventually, they fall, not because the world gets smarter, not because justice is inevitable. They fall because they cannot help themselves. Let's talk about why serial killers get caught. It's not always police brilliance. It's not always forensic miracles. More often, it's the killer's own mind that betrays them. Let's talk about the erosion of the mask. Early on, they are careful, meticulous, disciplined. But as the killings accumulate, the internal hunger grows faster than their ability to control it. They get sloppy. They take bigger risks. They taunt police. They leave clues sometimes intentionally, sometimes not. Because deep down, the fantasy isn't just about killing. It's about recognition, about being seen. Let's talk about the paradox of power and exposure. Killing is a private power, but no private act can fully satisfy a mind that craves omnipotence. They want the world to know, to fear, to whisper their name in dark rooms, and so they begin to leave breadcrumbs, letters to newspapers, phone calls to victims' families, personal trophies left at crime scenes. Each act a gamble. Come find me, if you can. Let's talk about narcissism and downfall. Serial killers often develop grandiose self-images. They believe they are smarter than everyone else, more evolved, beyond the reach of ordinary fools. This arrogance blinds them. They underestimate the investigators, overestimate their own invincibility, and make mistakes. DNA left behind, witnesses ignored, patterns they thought were invisible, now painfully obvious to profilers. Hubris, not guilt, brings them down. Let's talk about the collapse of the inner world. Over time, the compulsion to kill accelerates. Intervals between murder shorten. Control weakens. They begin acting on impulse, not ritual. Victims selected sloppily. Crime scenes contaminated because their inner fantasized structure that once held them together is breaking apart. The mask they wore to survive among humans can no longer stay on. The monster is slipping through the cracks. Let's talk about the psychology of capture. When caught, many serial killers react in chilling ways. Some are eerily calm. Some confess immediately, almost with relief. Some deny until overwhelming evidence buries them. But few show genuine remorse. Because for them, the murders were never crimes. They were the only moments of realness in otherwise meaningless lives. Let's talk about the emptiness that remains. When stripped of their rituals, their trophies, their stage, serial killers often collapse into hollow shells. Without killing, without fantasy, there's nothing left. No real relationships, no authentic self, just a void they can no longer fill. And in that void, justice finds them not because they are hunted, but because they have already destroyed themselves. Let's close with this. The mind of a serial killer isn't alien. It's human, twisted by trauma, warped by fantasy, fed by secrecy. And maybe that's the most terrifying truth of all, that the difference between them and us is not a gaping abyss. It's a few misfired neurons, a few scars too deep to heal, a few choices made when no one was looking. They are not monsters from another world. They are mirrors. And sometimes, if you look too closely, you might see reflections you don't want to recognize.